Most people live haunted by a quiet bitterness, an unspoken question that eats away at their pride. How is it that the man who stumbles through words, who can barely string a coherent sentence together, somehow commands the life you've only dreamed of? The car, the women, the ease, the confidence, the freedom, while you, the one who followed the rules, studied hard, stayed up late, obeyed every principle of virtue and reason, still lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering why your intelligence never turned into power. The truth is cruel, but it's ancient. It was never about effort. It was never about being good or right or clever. It was about understanding the game, strategy. You were raised to believe the world rewards fairness, that hard work plus intelligence equals reward. But you were trained by servants, not rulers. The world doesn't reward the smartest. It rewards the boldest. It rewards timing, leverage, audacity. Machiavelli warned us, power belongs not to those who are righteous, but to those who understand people. Not to those who seek justice, but to those who command results. The intelligent man polishes his thoughts. The Machiavellian man sharpens his knife. The smart man waits for the right answer. The strategist moves first, then finds the answer later. There is no fairness, only alignment. And the so-called fools often align faster. They move before the intelligent even finish thinking. They fail in public. They fall, rise, and repeat. And through that chaos, they gain what the overthinkers never touch: momentum. The intelligent man debates theory. The Machiavellian ends the game with a pawn. It isn't brilliance that wins, it's motion, emotional control, ruthless presence. Look around you. The ones who rise, the ones who dominate the feed, the room, the market, they're not the most articulate. They're the ones who make people feel, because emotion rules before logic ever enters the room. That's the first rule of modern power. Emotion beats logic. Power isn't about accuracy. It's about impact. You can be right and invisible, or wrong and unforgettable. Mark understood that early. While his peers mocked TikTok, quoting philosophers and statistics no one cared about, Mark studied algorithms not to learn, but to bend them. He didn't educate. He provoked. He didn't inform. He entertained. He knew confidence sells better than competence. Attention became his currency, and the world paid him for it. He crafted belonging in a sea of noise. Now, while his peers argue about facts, he monetizes their debates. Sarah, sitting in a corporate cubicle, saw it too. She wasn't the best, but she was visible. She spoke when others stayed quiet. She took credit when no one else did. The real genius sat 3 seats away, too polite, too accurate, too invisible. And so Sarah rose while brilliance faded. Success doesn't go to the deserving. It goes to the assertive. The intelligent chase truth. The Machiavellian chases utility. He doesn't ask, "Is this fair?" He asks, "Does this work?" That's the mindset shift that divides players from pieces. Intelligence is potential energy. Strategy is kinetic. Every day you hesitate, someone else executes half your idea with twice your boldness and wins. They make mistakes. You perfect theories. But mistakes gather data, feedback, momentum, real-world intelligence. The world rewards the one in motion. Adrian, a genius coder, built a flawless app. Secure, beautiful, polished. But he never launched. He kept waiting for perfection. Leo, less skilled but more ruthless, copied the idea, simplified it, and went live. Today, Leo is a millionaire. Adrian is still debugging. Speed beats perfection. Visibility beats purity. The market doesn't care what you almost did. It remembers who showed up. Perfectionism is invisible nobility, and invisibility is death. People don't respect what they can't see. The world forgets the perfect idea, but never the first success. That's why visibility matters more than intelligence. Once people see you, they build myths around you. They tell your story for you, and that myth becomes credibility. Not through truth, but through perception. The illusion of mastery often wins before mastery itself. Humans obey confidence, not logic. That's why fools lead and geniuses obey, because humans confuse motion for leadership. They follow energy, not evidence. That's the second law of power. Appearance beats essence. People want to believe in what they see. Appear strong and they will bend to your will. Appear hesitant and they will bury you in doubt. Tariq knew nothing of sales, but he understood human nature. He didn't wait for a decade of experience. He looked the part before he was the part. A clean shirt, a clear tone, short videos. Within 3 months, clients were paying him. Not for skill, but for certainty. That's the Machiavellian rule. Men are moved more by what they see than by what they understand. Appear powerful and you become powerful. And here's the bitter truth, the one that burns the thinkers. Simplicity isn't weakness. It's precision. The ones you call dumb mastered clarity. They speak in one-liners, not lectures. They build belief, not essays. Because power comes from clarity. Clarity spreads. Clarity becomes gospel. You design truth. They design loyalty. And loyalty conquers logic. The man who repeats his message becomes a brand. The man who questions everything becomes a ghost. The world belongs to those who simplify, amplify, and repeat. While you dissect, they dominate. The rich you ridicule aren't stupid. They're strategic. They learned the speed of execution, the leverage of visibility, and the weapon of simplicity. They're not chasing approval. They're manufacturing perception. You call it luck because you can't admit its method. Cold, deliberate method. They know the second the crowd believes, reality follows. They don't wait for recognition. They frame it. They don't chase validation. They construct it. While you argue about authenticity, they cash in on belief. They don't need your respect. They own your focus. And focus is the new wealth. Control the narrative, and you control perception. Control perception, and you control behavior. That's the ladder of modern power, simple, silent, and absolute. Yet the intelligent cling to fairness like it's sacred. They wait for discovery. They wait for someone to notice their virtue. But virtue without leverage is ornamental. Truth without audience is noise. Honesty without framing is suicide. Machiavelli warned, the illusion of virtue matters more than virtue itself. Reputation is armor. Image is ammunition. The powerful don't need to be good. They just need to appear consistent. Consistency births trust. Trust births influence. And influence prints money. Credentials don't matter. Visibility does. Repetition does. Noise does. People assume signal where they see volume. Influencers you mock, they're not lucky. They're disciplined. Ruthless executors disguised as entertainers. Behind the filters lies structure. Behind the laughter lies leverage. They post daily not out of ego, but calculation. They're not authentic. They're strategic. Not dumb, decisive. And that decisiveness makes them magnetic. Because humans follow conviction, not truth. The Machiavellian understands that perception is reality's architect. If they see strength, they obey. If they see doubt, they devour. It's not manipulation. It's understanding the software of human nature. While you defend truth, they weaponize attention. That's why they sit at the head of the table while you wait for an invitation. You think it's unfair. That's your first mistake. Fairness is a story for the powerless. The game rewards not morality but motion. Not purity but performance. Results don't speak, people do. And people only speak about what's visible. If you're not framing the story, someone else is, and their version doesn't include you. That's why action is the real religion of power. You cannot think your way to dominance. Thought without movement is self-imprisonment. Every genius who hesitated died poor in a rich man's world. Intelligence without boldness is paralysis. The Machiavellian fears only stagnation. Every move, even if it fails, builds narrative. It shows you're in the arena. You're alive. You're dangerous. People don't follow perfection. They follow momentum. Failure done publicly becomes proof of courage, and courage is the new credibility. The fast gather intelligence in motion. The slow gather dust in theory. Books can teach you systems, but markets teach you speed, timing, emotion. That's why the movers, those who act first, shape the world. Visibility creates influence, but perception sustains it. People follow not leaders, but symbols of leadership. Power wears a mask of motion. The one who looks like he's rising, rises. The one who seems stuck, vanishes. Image isn't vanity. It's leverage. Presentation isn't fluff. It's force. Every aesthetic, every tone, every post, architecture for control. The system doesn't reward fairness. It rewards presence. Think of every moment you watch someone get applause for something you did better. That sting you felt, that was the truth revealing itself. The game never cared who was best. It cared who was visible. Fairness is fiction. Visibility is law, and that pain you feel when others win for less, that is not injustice. That is the tuition fee for hesitation, the tax on silence, the invisible punishment for those who mistake humility for power. The world doesn't need your genius. It needs your presence, because the future doesn't belong to the thinkers. It belongs to the ones who move while the thinkers are still thinking. The clearest message wins. The clearest face gets remembered. The clearest movement gathers followers. In a world drunk on distraction, clarity is currency. If people can't understand you in one sentence, they scroll. And every scroll away is a death of potential power. Power isn't lost through failure anymore. It's lost through noise. That's why simplicity isn't simple, it's surgical. Behind every effortless statement lies 1,000 refinements. Behind every natural presence stands a carefully engineered frame. The wealthy learned this long ago. They don't share knowledge. They share triggers. They don't explain. They evoke. Because emotion converts faster than reason. They understand what Machiavelli once warned. Men are so simple and so subject to present necessities that he who deceives will always find someone who will let himself be deceived. That's why the so-called dumb often seem brilliant. They act first and clarify later. The moment belongs to those who move, not those who analyze. But the truly Machiavellian know one more law of dominance. They don't fight the battle. They redefine the field. When denied access, they build the gate. When rejected by the elite, they create new circles. When ignored by systems, they invent new systems. That's how disruption is born. Not by rebellion, but by substitution. The elite of every era didn't argue with institutions. They replaced them. That's the difference between noise and revolution. The noisy demand recognition. The strategic make recognition obsolete. And that's why the rich stay ahead. Not because they're smarter, but because they move differently. They don't outthink you. They outposition you. Remember this pattern. Speed gets you entry. Action builds credibility. Perception builds power. Leverage multiplies it. Substitution makes it unstoppable. Together, these form the spine of quiet supremacy, the Machiavellian system that rewards those who move with precision instead of permission. But here lies the pain you'll rarely admit. You've seen these openings. You had those ideas. You had that chance, but you hesitated. You waited for clarity while someone with half your intellect moved first. And they won. Not because they were right, but because they were first. That is the world you live in. Power doesn't pause for fairness. It moves on. It always does. Now that you've seen the map, the machinery behind success, the question isn't, do you understand it? It's, will you use it? Because knowledge isn't leverage until it's applied. Intelligence is potential. Strategy is kinetic. You can be brilliant and broke, articulate and irrelevant, righteous and forgotten, or you can be bold, visible, paid. The choice was always yours. But if you want to last, speed alone won't save you. You need control. The enduring elite don't just move fast. They move with architecture. Speed without structure burns out. Motion without method collapses. That's why so many who rise overnight fall just as quickly. They mastered attention but not stability. They mistook applause for power. That's where the next principles separate predators from prey: patience, leverage, and substitution. Patience is not passivity. It's calculation. It's waiting like a lion, not barking like a dog. The impulsive win battles. The Machiavellian win wars. They understand silence is not weakness, it's compression. Power gathering behind restraint. They don't flaunt their wins. They stack them. They don't announce their next move. They observe yours. And when your guard is down, when arrogance blinds you, they strike once and own everything. That's the difference between the hungry and the dangerous. You see this pattern in markets, politics, and empires. The ones who endure are those who know when to disappear, when to hold silence as a weapon, when to make their return irreversible. Patience isn't inaction, it's preparation. While the crowd performs for validation, the powerful construct inevitability, they don't chase attention. They anchor it. They don't spend to prove wealth. They reinvest to multiply it. You think they're quiet. They're building empires. You think they're lucky. They're engineering outcomes. And when patience meets timing, the next weapon awakens: leverage. the multiplier, the force that separates laborers from rulers. Most people work harder and harder, confusing motion for progress, wondering why they never escape their own effort. But the Machiavellian doesn't scale by sweat. He scales by structure. He replaces energy with design. Leverage is getting 10 times the result with the same movement, or less. It's the reason one man earns while another identical man starves. The poor trade time for money. The rich trade systems for money. Machiavelli himself sought not to wield power directly, but to construct mechanisms that made power self-sustaining. There are 4 levers in the modern arena: capital, people, code, and product. Capital, money that breeds itself. People, talent that multiplies your force. Code or media, content that works while you sleep. Product, structures that sell without you being there. The elite understand these by instinct. The worker thinks in hours. The ruler thinks in systems. Felix learned this truth the hard way. He began flipping sneakers for scraps, hand to hand. But then he saw the ceiling. He automated, delegated, scaled. Months later, the same actions yielded 10 times the reward. Not because he became smarter, but because he became leveraged. And that's the silent game. Architecture, not effort. When the system resists, when the rules refuse to bend, the Machiavellian doesn't beg. He substitutes. That is the most dangerous weapon of all. When he meets a wall, he builds a door. Substitution means creating new systems that make the old ones irrelevant. When institutions say no, he creates new markets. When gatekeepers block him, he becomes the gate. That's how real power moves, not by fighting, but by making resistance meaningless. You can't fight what you no longer need. That's why the most dangerous man isn't the rebel who protests. It's the builder who vanishes and returns as the new system. Power moves silently. By the time the world notices, it's already irreversible. That's why the wise don't seek permission. They construct inevitability. They begin with awareness. They stalk patterns. They learn players. Then they move with leverage. Systems, networks, machines, force multipliers that compound every action. And when the friction comes, they substitute, vanish, reinvent, reappear as the new authority. That's how empires rise. Not with noise, but with inevitability. Quietly, coldly, efficiently. But even mastery of these principles isn't enough, because many who win the game still lose themselves. They conquer others but fall to addiction, to momentum, to validation, to ego. They become slaves to the very power they built. That's why true Machiavellian mastery ends in discipline. Discipline is not suffering, it's structure, the architecture of self-command. The first law of discipline is emotional detachment. You stop reacting. You stop needing approval. You stop waiting to feel ready. You move precisely, regardless of mood. Because emotion is the lever the world uses to control you. Every ad, every post, every narrative, it's built to pull your feelings like strings. If they can make you react, they can make you predictable. And predictability is weakness. The powerful choose fear, but not of others. Fear of mediocrity. Fear of regret. Fear of wasting their one brief advantage. That fear fuels focus. Focus fuels detachment. And detachment builds consistency. Then comes the second pillar, reputation management. Your name becomes currency. Your narrative becomes a fortress. You stop protecting your ego. You protect your frame. Every decision passes one filter. Does this strengthen or weaken my control? You amplify wins. You own losses before others weaponize them. You speak when framing matters, and stay silent when silence intimidates. Reputation isn't vanity. It's armor. It shapes how others act around you, even when you're absent. That's power at its purest, control without presence. But the most advanced form of power, the one that separates rulers from kings, is controlled visibility. You don't reveal your full method. You don't explain your structure. You leave mystery as bait. Because once they understand you, they can copy you. But if they can't predict you, they can't defeat you. Mystery multiplies magnetism. It makes them guess, discuss, obsess. And obsession is control disguised as curiosity. The Machiavellian doesn't need to shout. His silence does the talking. He doesn't need to prove. His outcomes prove themselves. Controlled visibility means staying 2 moves ahead, revealing just enough to spark belief, never enough to reveal design. This is how influence becomes religion. Because what they can't understand, they mythologize. What they can't predict, they follow. And this is the final metamorphosis, the arc, the moment when the man inside the system becomes the architect of it. When you stop reacting to the board and start designing the board. When you stop chasing opportunity and start building inevitability. That's the Machiavellian evolution, the pawn who learns the rules so deeply he becomes the invisible king. The strategist behind the stage, the one whose absence shapes more than others' presence. And so the question isn't how clever you are, it's how calculated you're willing to be. Will you keep waiting for recognition, or will you create it? Will you stay loyal to systems that exploit you, or will you construct your own? Will you be the thinker who explains, or the mover who dominates? Most will keep thinking, watching, hesitating. They'll rationalize their inaction as integrity. They'll mistake humility for virtue. They'll rot quietly in brilliance. But a few will feel this truth in their bones. They'll stop asking for fairness. They'll stop apologizing for confidence. They'll stop hiding behind potential. They'll move, deliberate, decisive, unannounced. Because the Machiavellian understands the final law of power. It's not the smartest who win. It's those who turn intelligence into weaponry. Intelligence without strategy is decoration. Strategy without motion is death. But intelligence turned cold, structured, emotionless, that's empire. That's dominance. That's the art of invisible control. And now that you've seen the full design, now that the illusions have cracked, the only question that matters is this. What will you do with it? Because the next move determines everything.